Python data types. If you look at this diagram, here I have a global frame where there are some number of variables have been aligned, and each and every variable have been allocated with its value. But if you look at the values are of not the same family of data types. Each and every variable has a different type of value in it. Let's consider a variable 1, which refers to an integer family. But if you look at the variable 4, refers to a string variable, a string type. Similarly, if you look at the variable 6, which is altogether pointing to a family called list, it's an object type. So that's why the global frame is actually pointing to an object segment. All these are primitive types. If you look at the variable 1 through variable 5, it's all a primitive type. But then coming to the variable 6 is altogether taken into a new shape called object type. If you look at the next diagram, here it says every individual variable is pointed to a specific class type called int, float, boolean, string, and list. This outcome, what you're seeing here on this picture, is all the same of what you have seen in the earlier picture of that global frame. Now what happens here is I'm trying to trace out each and every variable's type. Is that a variable 1 an integer or a float? Is that a variable 3 is a boolean or a string? So I want to figure out that what type these variables are of. From this traceability, we can come to a conclusion that the Python plays around with multiple data types in it. So the data type members are integer, floating, boolean, string, and altogether you have a different custom object types as well, like list. Or even we can create our own data types, which is called as a custom data type. Like we can create an employee type, we can create a faculty type. So there can be any number of custom types that you can create in Python, apart from the inbuilt types that's being defined in the Python context itself. Now let me take you to some demonstration. If you look at the data types, so I'm declaring a variable called x and I'm assigning a value called 10. So how do we track the type of this variable? You can use the print function to print out the type of this variable by using a special function called type function. And if I execute this, you notice that it belongs to a specific class category called int. Means this x is of type int. Obviously, it's a crystal clear understanding that the Python programming language supports a data type called int in it. Similarly, let's go and explore the other types as well. Let's declare another variable called y, and I'm going to assign a value called 34.5, which ideally deals with a floating family. Let's try to figure out what type this y belongs to by using the type function, and then forward the parameter of the y variable to this function and execute this. As I said, this belongs to a class type called float. Great. What else we have? Let's go and see the next type of data type that's been supported by Python. Can I use the same variable as the x here? Yes, of course we can do it, because that's what we have studied in the earlier session of dynamic typing. We can use the same variable x equals, and then we can altogether define a different value for it or initialize a different value for it. So let's say true. True is a type of family coming under the Boolean category. So let's go ahead and print this x, and now this time you should notice that it's not going to belong to the class called int, rather it's going to belong to the class called Boolean, which is bool. Bool means it's a shorthand representation of a Boolean here in Python. So int, float, Boolean. That's great. What else we have? Let's go and explore. I'm going to use the same variable y. So dynamically, this y variable, which was initially referred to a floating category, is going to be changed to a type called string. Let's try to track this ID as well with the help of this type function and promote this variable y here and execute it. You get the class type called string. So from this, we can understand something that Python supports primitive types like int, float, Boolean, and so on. And you can trace those types with the help of a special function that's been offered by Python called type. You can print those type of that variable and get to know what type that variable belongs to. And also you have noticed that Python promotes a dynamic typing of coding. So the same variable which belong to the int family can be represented into the Boolean at the later point of time.